I'm Margaret Chen, 78 years old, and my son David stole $2 million from my late husband's business while I was grieving. He forged documents, bribed accountants, and convinced everyone I was too old and senile to understand finances. What David didn't know was that I'm a retired CPA who built that business from nothing and still remember every account number. When he tried to have me declared incompetent and put in a nursing home to cover his tracks, I decided enough was enough. This is how I exposed his massive fraud operation and sent my own son to prison for 15 years. Subscribe now. Hit that bell for more shocking revenge stories. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 78 years old. My husband Thomas died 3 years ago at 81 after we'd been married for 56 years. We built a successful medical supply distribution company together, starting in 1972, with just $5,000 and a dream. By the time Thomas died, Chen Medical Supplies was worth $12 million with contracts across 15 states. Thomas and I had one son, David, who was 52 when his father died. We'd given David everything: the best schools, a job as VP of operations in our company, a generous salary he didn't really earn. But David always wanted more. He resented that we wouldn't just hand him the company and retire. He thought we were too old to still be running things. When Thomas died, I inherited 60% of the company. David already owned 40% from shares we'd given him over the years. The will was clear. I would maintain majority control until I died. Then David would inherit everything. It was fair, and it protected the business Thomas and I spent 50 years building. But David had other plans. 2 months after his father's funeral, while I was still deep in grief, David started his scheme. He told me gently that I should step back from the business and let him handle everything. "Mom, you've been through so much. Let me take care of the company now. You deserve to rest." I was exhausted from grief and agreed to take some time away from the office. That was my mistake. The moment I stepped back, David went to work stealing everything he could. Over the next 8 months, David systematically looted the company. He created fake vendor accounts and wrote checks to himself for hundreds of thousands of dollars. He inflated expenses and pocketed the difference. He sold company equipment and kept the money. He even mortgaged company property and diverted the loan proceeds to his personal accounts. By the time I started asking questions, David had stolen over $2 million. When I confronted him about suspicious transactions I'd noticed in the quarterly reports, he laughed at me. "Mom, you're 78 years old. You don't understand modern business anymore. These are legitimate expenses that I don't expect you to comprehend." I asked to see detailed financial records. David refused. "I'm not going to waste time explaining routine business operations to someone who can barely remember what day it is. Maybe it's time we talked about you getting some help at home. You're getting confused." That's when I realized David wasn't just stealing. He was setting me up. He was going to have me declared incompetent so he could take full control of the company and cover up his fraud. I started receiving letters from his attorney suggesting I needed a guardian. David told family members I was showing signs of dementia and couldn't be trusted with finances anymore. But David made one critical mistake. He forgot that before I was his mother, I was a certified public accountant who'd managed complex business finances for 50 years. I might be 78, but my mind was sharp and I knew exactly how to detect financial fraud because I'd built every system in that company myself. I called my attorney, Frank Morrison, who'd been our family lawyer for 30 years. "Frank, David is stealing from the company and trying to have me declared incompetent to cover it up. I need your help." Frank was shocked. "Margaret, are you sure? That's a serious accusation against your own son." "I'm completely sure, and I can prove it. I'd been secretly gathering evidence for 2 months. Every night I logged into the company financial systems using my credentials that David didn't know I still had. I downloaded bank statements, vendor contracts, payment records, and expense reports. I compared current transactions to historical patterns from when Thomas and I ran the company. The fraud was everywhere once you knew what to look for. Fake vendors with addresses that didn't exist. Checks written to shell companies David had created. Equipment sales where the money never reached company accounts. Mortgage proceeds that vanished. Payroll padding where David had added fake employees and collected their paychecks himself. I compiled everything into a detailed report showing exactly how David had stolen $2.1 million over 8 months. I had bank records proving the money went to accounts David controlled. I had emails where David instructed the accountant to hide certain transactions from me. I had everything. Frank looked at my evidence in amazement. Margaret, this is ironclad. David committed massive fraud. We need to go to the police immediately. But I wanted to do something first. I called a surprise board meeting of Chen Medical Supplies. As majority owner, I had that right. David showed up confident and smug, probably thinking I was going to announce my retirement or incompetence. Instead, I stood up in front of the board, which included 3 independent directors, and presented my complete fraud analysis. David has stolen $2.1 million from this company over the past 8 months through fake vendors, shell companies, equipment theft, and payroll fraud. Here's the documentation proving every transaction. David's face went white. Mom, you're confused. You don't understand what you're looking at. These are legitimate business expenses. Really? Then explain why Millennial Medical Supplies, which you paid $400,000 to last quarter, doesn't exist. The address is a vacant lot. Or explain why you sold $300,000 worth of warehouse equipment and the money went to your personal account instead of the company. Or explain these 15 fake employees on payroll whose checks you've been cashing yourself. David tried to bluster. This is senile confusion. I'm going to have Mom evaluated by a doctor because she's clearly not mentally competent. One of the independent board members, Sarah Hughes, stood up. David, I've reviewed Margaret's analysis. It's detailed, documented, and damning. You've committed fraud. The board is voting immediately to remove you as VP of Operations and turn this evidence over to law enforcement. The vote was unanimous. David was fired on the spot. The board authorized me to file criminal charges. David left the meeting screaming that I was a senile old woman who'd regret this. 2 days later, the police arrested David at his home. The district attorney reviewed my evidence and charged him with embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and theft of over $2 million. The DA told me, Mrs. Chen, in 30 years as a prosecutor, I've never seen such thorough documentation of fraud. You did our job for us. David's attorney tried to claim I was senile and had fabricated the evidence. The DA brought in a psychologist to evaluate me. After 3 hours of testing, the psychologist reported, Mrs. Chen is mentally sharp, has excellent memory, and shows no signs of cognitive decline. She's more competent than people half her age. David's attempt to paint me as incompetent collapsed. His own accountant turned on him and testified that David had ordered him to hide transactions and threatened to fire him if he told me anything. The accountant had emails proving everything. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified about discovering the fraud and how I'd spent 50 years building the business David tried to destroy. I'm 78 years old, but I remember every account, every vendor, every system in this company. When David created fake vendors, I knew immediately because I know every real vendor personally. When he inflated expenses, I caught it because I know what things actually cost. When he tried to call me senile, I proved I'm sharper than he ever was. The jury convicted David on all charges. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison and ordered him to repay every dollar he'd stolen. Mr. Chen, you stole from your own mother while she was grieving your father's death. You tried to have her declared incompetent to cover your crimes. You showed contempt for the woman who gave you life and built the business you tried to destroy. 15 years in federal prison. David is now 2 years into his 15-year sentence. His wife divorced him. His friends abandoned him. And the business is thriving under my leadership again at 78 years old. I hired a new executive team and promoted the accountant who'd cooperated with prosecutors. I restructured the company finances and recovered most of what David stole through seized assets and insurance claims. Chen Medical Supplies is now worth $14 million, more than when David started stealing. I'm 78 years old. I'm a widow who lost my husband of 56 years. I'm a CPA who spent 50 years building a successful business. And I'm a mother who sent her own son to prison for betraying everything our family stood for. People ask if I feel guilty about David's sentence. The answer is no. He didn't just steal money. He tried to destroy my reputation, have me declared incompetent, and steal the company Thomas and I built together. He deserves every year of that sentence. I still run Chen Medical Supplies at 78. I go to the office 4 days a week. I review every major transaction personally. And I've added fraud detection systems that would catch anyone who tries what David did. David thought my age made me vulnerable. He thought grief made me weak. He thought he could steal millions while calling me senile. He learned that 78 years of life includes 50 years of accounting expertise, and you don't steal from a CPA who built the business herself. Last month, David wrote me a letter from prison apologizing and begging me to reduce his sentence. I wrote back with 2 words: absolutely not. I'm Margaret Chen. I'm 78 years old, and I proved that age brings wisdom, experience, and the ability to destroy anyone who underestimates you. The end.